Okay.
Hello.
How's it going?
I'm starting messed up.
You're starting messed up.
Starting to rest up.
Oh, you're starting. Oh, from yes, you had Super Bowl.
Nine services in 7 days plus an extra one I went to.
So Santa Claus is tired.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So I had a question about that Easter Monday.
Yes.
What's the kind of like what's the Easter Monday like for after? I mean, you've done what? So like events. You said nine in a
There's a
week.
yeah, so counting Palm Sunday service, which is different, was done differently than our normal service. Not that different, but a little different. There's a little bit of extra work going to it. And then we had 5 noonday services that were ecumenical. We had folks from the AME Zion, a Truth Christian Church of God, a Presbyterian Church, a few other United Methodist pastors. There were 7 pastors involved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had that hosted that at our church and do every year. And then we had a Holy Day service at night and a Tenebrae night service of darkness on Friday night. And then Saturday morning, we actually had a breakfast. The normal, it just happened to fall. It's a third Saturday of the week, month, where we invite anybody that wants to come to have
So this
breakfast
is
with
just
us.
that was a normal thing that you do. It's not particularly
It's a,
Easter.
it's a, it's a normal thing. It's not necessarily a part of Holy Week. It just happened to fall this week.
Sure.
And then I went to a sunrise service at the neighbor churches, I'm not a morning person, so. And then the Easter service on Sunday, and then Monday is I had a Zoom meeting with some other folks, other pastors on Monday afternoon, which I do most of Mondays, and there were a lot of tired pastors. One in particular was literally falling asleep on our Zoom, and I said we should just leave this open so he can finish his nap. Um, and I know my secretary was looking at saying hi to her this morning, and I was able to talk to her for like 15 seconds, and I went, "You're really still tired." She says, "I can't get back on track, right?" So she was exhausted. I got some better rest on Sunday probably than she did because she had to go be with her family.
uh,
So it, it's
but then Easter
it's
Monday.
Easter Monday is the day everybody's tired.
Okay, so there's not like a whole lot of like. Is there anything that you do? You
No,
no. Okay, so
so
the bit all the stuff is basically over once Sunday hits. Super Bowl Sunday hits, it's done.
yeah, I mean, Easter is in our tradition a 50-day season, but Easter Sunday is the climax, and it's the
Mm,
beginning. It's
sure.
kind of like the Daytona. It's like the Daytona
It's the
500.
Daytona 500. That's right.
It's not the
It's
Super
not.
Bowl. It's the Daytona.
So Christmas is like the Super Bowl
That's right. Yeah,
because it's the event at the end, right?
yeah, that's right. And all the good sports start after that.
Oh man, that's kind of rough for football, isn't it? Speaking of baseball, my
But
Reds
yes,
have now climbed to
yeah.
500. At least I thought I checked last.
I've
And
been trying to get on the Pirates game, but my wife won't send me the text message I sent. I
oh,
have an app that I can actually watch the Pirates on my phone, but as long as I'm here, it's just kind of funny.
are you going to be trying to watch the Pirates while we do our
I'm
worldwide?
gonna try to keep up. They're playing the Angels. I mean, who doesn't want to watch that rally?
Right. That's going
No,
to be a
I'll
late
probably
one.
just end up.
Is that it? Is that in Anaheim? Or I guess it's
Yeah,
not.
it just
Are they in
started.
Anaheim? I guess they're just LA now, aren't they?
It's Anaheim.
Is
Yeah,
it?
but they're the Los. I think they're the Los Angeles Angels, but they're still in Anaheim. I think they're the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
Okay, whatever that is. Okay.
It's just stupid, is what it is.
Well, we
It's
had
like the Tennessee.
moving away from
By the
baseball.
by the way, one last thing on the Easter thing is the lowest attended Sunday in churches traditionally is the Sunday following Easter.
Yeah, this is that the one you go buck wild and just do whatever you want.
uh, no,
Okay,
probably
so
not. But
if you were a fire and brimstone preacher, Easter is about redemption, right?
If I'm a fire and brimstone preacher, I'm probably spending less time on Easter and more time on uh, Jesus died on the cross. Even after Easter, I mean,
Interesting. So
when I do my
it's
when
more
I do
about
my Easter sermon, I'm going to spend time about the death.
so the fire and brimstone people, they want to like focus in on the gruesome nature of the event.
The blood on the cross is the most important thing. That's right.
Do you
And
think
for me,
do
I don't want them to jump onto Easter. I want them to spend time at the cross, but I want them to move on. So,
did you
do I think?
did you see that movie some years back with the Mel Gibson? Um,
Yes, was awful.
yeah, I never saw it.
Well, so first off, a human body only holds so much blood.
Oh,
The amount of blood
hold
that
on. You're upset about the realism of it now.
it wasn't realism, it was extreme over the top. I mean, first
Oh,
off,
gotcha.
in that time, he would have they were going to lash him, so they lashed him, and you could the lashes because they were counting a long time in another
Uh-huh.
language, of course.
Sure.
And it was like 120 lashes. The understanding of the time was if you lash somebody 40 times,
They'd be
they
dead.
would die. So you only do 39, right?
Sure.
So first off, the lashing was just extreme. And then the amount of blood was like gallons of blood being poured out.
I mean, it's a miracle.
No, it, still a human body.
But it's a miracle, right? This whole
It
thing's
was,
supposed to be a miracle. It doesn't happen unless he gets up there and talks to his dad, right?
yeah, but that wasn't supposed to be a miracle. That was, supposed to be the human part. And I don't know. There was a great scene.
Wait,
Though. There was one great scene.
hold on. I'm curious about this. You as the preacher, you as the pastor, the miracle is not the forgiveness, it's the resurrection.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the miracle wasn't the lashing of Jesus.
Yeah, no, that's not. But I'm just okay. Maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, I was being literal in that sense. You were saying it's a miracle that there was gallons of blood, and I'm
Yeah,
saying no, that's
yeah, but I'm saying
not.
the whole event is a miracle, right? Like, he has to get up there and talk to his dad, and he's Jesus.
Well,
He
he
is his
doesn't have
dad.
to get up there to talk to his
He
dad.
can get up there and do it. He's going to make himself worried. The interpretation from Mel Gibson, chapter 2, verse 12, is that and Jesus called forth gallons of extra blood to appease the bloodlust of the watchers.
Yeah, the movie was way over the top. It was interesting that they tried to use somebody, Caviezel, whatever his first name was, did an interesting job, especially acting with the language that nobody speaks, and doing it sounding like he was fluent in the language. I think he did a very good job with the role.
He's basically a right-wing superhero now.
He is. Yeah. And I'm sure that's what made him that.
Mel Gibson, weirdly, is at the same time a right-wing superhero, but for different reasons.
Oddly, the ones who are claiming the reason for holding money back from Brutus, their reason is anti-Semitism. They're trying to rid the world of anti-Semitism, and yet they have Mel Gibson as one of their examples of good people, who's clearly an anti-Semite. But there was, by the way, I'm not seeing anything. There was, by the way, a great scene.
We are.
Movie where Jesus is, he's a carpenter, and there's these flashback scenes in the movie, and he's younger, and he's an adult, but he's doing some work, and he's built this thing, and he wants his mom to see it, and he wants her to be real proud of it. He says, "Mom, look at this," and she says, "What is it?" "It's a dining room. It's a dining table. People will come and they'll sit down in something. Excuse me. They'll sit down in something like a chair, and they'll sit there at the table, sitting upright, And at the time they lounged, when they ate.
Oh yeah,
And
I
so
don't
they
know
he
this.
said,
This is
"We'll sit."
fun.
So, so she squats at the end of the table and puts her arms on the table and stands back up and says, "Ah, it'll never catch on." So that was my favorite part of the whole movie.
That was, and this was I guess an embellishment.
Yeah, a flashback of what he might be thinking, remembering with his family, stuff like that, in the midst of the betrayal. I'm not sure when that part
Right.
when
So
it
so
was.
Jesus was thinking back to his carpenter days, and he created
Exactly.
he created the miracle of resting one's back while eating. So
That's
so
right.
Jesus' first miracle was not
Was two-handed
it
eating
wasn't the
anymore.
wine into the or the
Oh,
water into the wine. It
that's
was
right.
the fact that we can lean back now today
In our office
and
journey.
yes, and very uncomfortable gaming chairs that we were all tricked into buying because they looked cool. All right, so we're talking about some religious stuff. Another big thing happened this Easter weekend. The Pope
And by the
died.
way, for United Methodist, the day before on Easter Sunday morning, one of our bishops died, who was 90 something years old. He was older than the Pope actually, and he developed a Bible study that has been dated and updated for many generations, a few generations at this point.
Interesting.
And so Bishop Wilkie passed away, and he was somebody eventually became an advocate for LGBTQ folks.
That's interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
so we have a little bit to talk about regarding the Pope and
right.
well, this handsome fellow that we have on the screen here. I think his name is Father Casey, and this guy has 421,000 subscribers, so he's doing quite well in the frock there. And
Uh-huh.
I was just looking up, just there's a lot of news stories on Pope Francis. Hey, Dara. Um,
Hello, Dara.
a lot of
Yeah, there's a
there's a lot of stuff in the news, but I couldn't find a lot of like modern day takes on like what his what his I mean it was either like this 2 hour like, oh my gosh, we have to go through all of Benedict's, like, well, that
right.
was an interesting story. I did a lot of Pope watch and stuff. We found out about, I forgot that Benedict had resigned, and that was the first time that had happened in 600 years.
Yeah, and
And
I'm curious if it's the first time that a resigned pope still is in the phone, so to speak. Still is there when the pope that followed dies.
right, right, yes. And so he's also, other things I learned, he's a Jesuit, and I had to look up what that
Yes,
was really, which to me seems like the actual what Christianity is, Jesuit, when I looked it up. Of course, I it's a little bit literal for me. In terms of like giving up the worldly. I mean, not obviously for me. I don't believe in any of it, but I'm just saying like, they really do go with let's give up the worldly possessions as best as they can. And I think one of the stories I thought was interesting about Francis was that he didn't live in the main area. He had like a guest house he stayed in. Uh,
right. Yeah,
yeah. So I mean,
you know,
he was kind of
I've
a cool
known
guy.
I've known I've known one Jet. He wasn't Catholic. He actually was married to a Catholic, Episcopalian, but he was a doctor originally in his first career, and OBGYN, and then uh, midway through his career decided to leave the wealth life of being in Nashville OBGYN and to seminary and uh,
Interesting. From OBGYN
to
to seminary.
spent a couple of years in Africa. I think it was a couple of years. I think it was less than that. Spent months, let's say that, because I'm pretty sure about that. In Africa somewhere, I don't know where.
Hmm.
I don't remember heavily what region of Africa. I know it wasn't South Africa. I know it wasn't Egypt, but beyond that, that's about
Africa
it.
is big, very big.
It is a very
So
big
Africa
continent.
is so
It
big.
is, and it's not a country like some people think it is. It's a
Yeah.
bunch of countries.
Oh
There's a
man,
lot of countries in Africa,
it is so big.
and he came back and moved to the area, moved to East Tennessee, and served in Campbell County, and uh, as a doctor, but as somebody who served underserved people. And he was a part of a Bible study that was in, and that I did every Monday to talk about the scripture coming up the next week. And he just came and joined us, and he was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed him a lot. He really believed and practiced what he preached, and just believed that love. Where's the love in this? Where's the love in this? Was the question he always asked.
Right. Which is kind of what we ask. Right.
That's right.
That's
That's
the
exactly
hope.
right. Both of us. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
By the
Justin
way,
and Justin Timberlake asks that with the Black Eyed Peas. Asks often,
That's right.
where's the
So
love?
I just want to know one stupid thing.
Mhm.
Where are the conspiracy theories? Where are the conspiracy theorists this week telling us that J.D. Vance killed the Pope?
Oh man, there's no conspiracy theorists that are really gonna go after that. Like it's not their side. Like listen, there's okay. So there's
That's right. It's not their side.
It's not the side that they conspiracy theorists right now are 98% right wingers. In my estimation,
Yeah,
maybe that's probably not true, but I'm pulling that
sure,
number out my ass.
It feels that way.
It just, I mean,
It feels
I mean, it's like up is down with them right now, and JD Vance, if the way they would probably frame it is that JD Vance inspired him to die with his eloquent words. So
you've been watching this stuff too much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man.
The Pope waited for the chance to meet him before he died.
Yeah. Now I heard that story was actually quite interesting. Now I don't think we knew that he was going to have a stroke and a heart attack at the same time at this point. But from what I understand, the Pope had a couple words with him, and then he sent him to like his minion, but mainly it was just so the minion could like chastise him about being good to people and kind, and like
that's right.
So that was the report.
The other thing, and the other irony that I saw there was that, do you remember when the orange one went to Pope when he was the first round?
I do not remember it well. I remember it, but I don't remember it well.
So you might remember that Mike Pence was a Catholic.
Yes, that's right.
And he did not let Mike Pence go with him.
Oh, really?
Really? That petty.
That is. But I mean, it's not just petty. It's like
it was vindictive and mean-hearted and petty.
But why was he? Things. But why would he? He didn't have the like. Was he just being mean to Pence at that time? Because. But was he being?
Even then, he was being mean to Pence.
Because Pence wasn't like. He was using Pence anyway, if we're being real. He wanted to get the evangelical vote, so he thought this was the way to do it. What he didn't know is he already had it. Like, he was mean to the right people. He had it. So,
that's right.
So,
anyway,
let's talk a little bit about Pope Francis. I thought this was an interesting video. This is a 3-year-old plus video. And it's titled Pope Francis Dividing the Church. Here's why. And I didn't know what I was going to get. I was like, maybe this guy's going to tell me why Pope Francis was a piece of crap going in. But that's not how he went. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's some straight up dictionary words that I had to kind of like look up a little bit. And I still am not sure if I got it all. But I generally got the message of what this was. And then I've got another Vox article prepared to look over who might be the potential if we even care. Then after that, I've got more Christian nationalist stuff from Christy Burke to finish off. And if we decide not to do that, we can also play Helldivers and dive into hell. So we have plans. So, okay, let's start with Father Casey. I believe it's Father Casey. Make sure. Yeah. Well, all right, here we go.
Francis has been the most controversial pope of any of our lifetimes, dividing the church into those who think that he's the greatest pope ever and those who think he's a heretic, with little in between. In recent years, the latter's group has grown only louder, with some going as far to say that he is not even the real pope at all. Obviously, one video cannot synthesize every detail of his pontificate or adjudicate every controversy, and I'm certainly not qualified to even try. Plenty of thick books have been written on that subject, and surely many more will come out in the coming decades. For this video, though, I want to focus on but one criticism I hear all the time: that he has created confusion in the church. Listen to his opponents, and this is the resounding cry. Pope Francis is confusing. He's ambiguous. He's a weak and divisive leader that is causing the faithful to go astray because he doesn't know how to directly teach the tradition of the church. I really couldn't disagree more. In this video, I'd like to suggest 4 things that are fueling this notion that Pope Francis is confusing, with a solution for each. First, I think it's important to approach this topic with a bit of humility and admit that the average Catholic is not particularly well catechized.
Okay, I was like, catechized? Do you have catechized? So like, just don't you basically there's a rule book sort of that's ongoing, I suppose, like a decision
Catechism is similar to confirmation. It's when the learning of what it is to be a Catholic.
Right, but this is like what? Okay, maybe I need to let him speak a little bit more. But he was talking about like how it changes. The church has made rulings over the years, right? And some people just don't know what the rulings have been, or the decisions, or the, I don't know, I guess pontifications, right?
Many of the same people who criticize Pope Francis like to cite that flawed communion study that says that only 30% of Catholics believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, so this should be an easy point to concede.
That was another one. I was like, what is the Eucharist?
This week I posted a poll on Twitter and this channel. Who has read and can state something meaningful about Populorum Progressio, Laborum Exercens, and Caritas in Veritate?
Do you have any idea what this is?
No.
Yeah, so these are apparently, okay, so this is what he's describing, to my best knowledge. These are things that happened that were like the church said, like, here's a human condition, and this is how the church feels about it. Right? So I think that's what this is. 3
major social encyclicals about the church's teaching in the economy, one each by Paul VI, John Paul II, and Benedict XVI. While only a few hundred responded, by no means a proper sample size, the results are what everyone would expect. Almost no one has a grasp of what they say. An overwhelming majority know almost nothing of 3 of the most important church documents from the last 50 years.
All right, so what he's saying is that basically, you know, most of the people in the Catholic Church don't even know what the Catholic Church is saying. But I would argue that maybe this is all churches in some way or another. There's a lot of people don't know what's being said by their actual church. They don't even really know what's being said in the Bible.
I would tell you that in my churches, if you were to ask them what stance the United Methodist Church has on issue, very few would know the answer to that.
Yeah, just a standard member, right? But so, like, these are the people that are like, you know, where the power lies, right?
On the development of people, on workers' rights, on the social and economic issues of a global world. These are documents that criticize unfettered capitalism, demand living wages for workers, call for social solidarity, and insist that the common good take precedence over private property. 3 documents that didn't come out of nowhere, but were in keeping with the tradition already set before it. And so, if people are completely unaware of these documents, if they do not know that such teachings are the orthodox stance of the Catholic Church, they're going to hear about Pope Francis's letters on the environment, the importance of native cultures, criticisms of capitalism, and call for solidarity across national borders, and they're going to say socialism. They're going to think he's driven by politics, that he's a heretic, that he's creating confusion.
We're getting
Really,
overlay here.
it's just portrait pieces. Now, luckily, there's a really easy solution to this problem. Learn more about church teaching. Read the Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Church. It's free online. Learn about the 7 tenets of Catholic social teaching. When you hear Francis say something that sounds a bit strange, look it up in the Catechism. Take it to prayer. Use it as an opportunity to learn more.
What in the world
Don't
has
just assume the
happened?
Pope is an idiot. Don't just assume the 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 Pope.
Okay, this is a nightmare. Thanks, Ed, for making me try to fix this. I was like, okay, I'll try to fix the chat. And it's like about to crash my computer because the sound is just going over and over. Okay, all right, let's figure it out. I'm gonna turn off my mic.
Good idea. Good idea. Oh, it's echoing me too, y'all. Wow. Thank you, Dara. The joy of technology working and not working. Nope. Technology. So if you just got and not working. If you just got it all layered. Kate Dunstall would be proud.
Okay. I think I've got it now.
Kate Dunstall would be proud of you.
Yeah, I don't. For some reason, the Twitch chat decided it was gonna like pop in. I didn't. Yeah, wicked. Yeah, that was that was a bit of a trip, man.
The first part, especially.
Ed came in. He was like, "Hey, man," I was just trying. I was like, "Yeah, I don't see any YouTube chats," and I couldn't figure. I was like, "Whatever," and then let's see if I can get it back on there. You know what? YouTube is just screwed. We'll just have to figure out what to do with YouTube later. It's Twitch and Facebook tonight. Okay. Well, that was fun. Where are we at? All right. So we were still explaining the catechesis, I guess, which is like a poor understanding of the church. And like what the rulings have been through the years. And because of this, what he's saying is that Pope Francis actually is just up to date on what the church has been saying. Y'all haven't been following along, I believe, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. Like you said, any church, I would guess, this is just based on my own experience, any church that has a international or even just a national body that is the one that kind of speaks for them officially, probably there's a lot of folks who don't pay any attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's move forward with Mr. or Father Casey here, and let's hope we don't get any wiki.
common good take precedence over private property. 3 documents that didn't come out of nowhere, but were in keeping with the tradition already set before it. And so, if people are completely unaware of these documents, if they do not know that such teachings are the orthodox stance of the Catholic Church, they're going to hear about Pope Francis's letters on the environment, the importance of native cultures, criticisms of capitalism, and call for solidarity across national borders, and they're going to say socialism. They're going to think he's driven by politics, that he's a heretic, that he's creating confusion. Really, it's just poor catechesis. Now, luckily, there's a really easy solution to this problem. Learn more about church teaching. Read the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church. It's free online. Learn about the 7 tenets of Catholic social teaching. When you hear Francis say something that sounds a bit strange, look it up in the catechism. Take it to prayer. Use it as an opportunity to learn more. Don't just assume the Pope is an idiot. He's not. What the Pope is Latin American and a Jesuit, and a clergyman formed after the Second Vatican Council, meaning that he has a different ecclesiology, different style of leadership, and different approach to communication than we're used to. If you look at the way that John Paul II and Benedict XVI governed as popes, we see a clear top-down style. As Supreme Pontiff, they saw it as their duty to dictate theology with absolute clarity and authority, expecting their bishops and theologians to obey and follow their leadership. When this didn't happen, theologians were silenced, bishops were reprimanded. Generally speaking, this is not how Pope Francis operates. While there have been situations in which he uses his authority decisively, he's more often interested in dialogue. As his recent synods indicate, particularly this new synod on synodality, he wants an active, vocal church that works together.
So I would assume this is like your style too.
No, that's a lot of big words.
No, I mean, like, this is your style too. That you wouldn't be the type that's like, I'm top down, I'm the authority. You want to have it. You want to get to like truth through discussion.
So the only place that I have pulled that is in designing certain worship services for my church.
Okay.
Because I just have to say them. You're going to have to trust me on them. But otherwise,
I'm the pro.
Yeah, exactly. I've done it before. Let me prove to you that it's worth it.
Right, but other than that, like Francis's style, which I appreciate, is he didn't just shut people down. He wanted it to be a discussion. Now, I think that might have backfired on him a little bit because he was a very progressive pope, right? And there's obviously other bishops out there that would like to criticize this, even though I guess maybe they're not supposed to, according to Catholic rules and stuff. But nonetheless, they did, right?
Well, yeah, something I think this guy said this a little bit earlier. Maybe I saw it somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure that was what he said at the beginning was there in thinking about the fact that a lot of people don't even realize edicts or whatever that the Pope had done, or that a Pope does, not just this one. I do think there is certainly some level of disconnect. Now, the Catholic folks that I've known really respect the Pope, but there's a difference. I think he's talking just there at the end of that about there's a difference in popes who were ordained to begin with before or after Vatican II. There's a different attitude about the role. Before that it was, I am the ultimate voice, period, and you don't have the right to argue. And I think this Pope in particular may have been one to say, let's have a conversation.
Sure. That's great.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wants bishops to express the needs of their own diocese, theologians to raise difficult questions, lay people to feel a part of the conversation. One of the reasons that we've seen so much open criticism of Pope Francis from clergy is because he's allowed it. Rather than silencing or demoting his critics, as his predecessors did, he allows it for the sake of public discourse. This is not to say that he's creating a democracy in which the most popular ideas win, but simply to say that he finds coming to the truth together as a process more effective than proclaiming it with his voice alone. For those jumping into the conversation before it's finished, or returning to point one, don't follow up by reading his post-synodal decrees, they're going to be left confused. This is a problem that's a bit more difficult to fix than just poor catechesis, because that pre-Vatican II ecclesiology and understanding of authority is embedded into so many people. I experience this a lot in our churches. People expect the pastor to act unilaterally, to quickly and decisively fix problems from on high, with no regard for the people's opinion or present state. Leadership that involves and incorporates others, working slowly towards consensus, will always be more difficult, but it's where faith flourishes in a community. My only recommendation for this is to remember that the church is as much a group of people as it is an institution. A pope may be right and know exactly what needs to be done, but if people aren't ready to hear it, if they don't feel heard themselves, it might not make a difference. Sometimes it's better to go slowly, trudging through the mud, to make sure that everyone gets there in the end. Because, really, the reason that some things don't appear clear is because they can't be. The human experience is complex, which means that there will always be some level of ambiguity to every answer we give. For many, this very well may be the crux of the issue. We want black and white answers. We think and act in a subjective reality and yet want to speak in absolutes. We want clarity when clarity...
Got something to say on that? Or you just wanted to yes?
I experienced that with everyone from one of my brothers, to a number of church folks, especially on the more conservative side, that tend to just they want their religion to be easy. And I don't mean necessarily that it doesn't challenge them in some ways, but that it's easy. There's a set of rules, it's black and white, and there's no nuance, there's no debate, there's no conversation. This is what it says, and that's what we do. And you've probably heard the line, the Bible said it, I don't know, the Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it, I think it was phrased a long time ago. And the problem is, of course, the Bible says a lot of things.
You kind of broke up there, and I wanted to make sure I got the whole thing. What was the phrase?
The Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that sounds easy because, well, the Bible only says one thing about everything that it says about. That's not true, of course. Right. Women in the pulpit, women in ministry, just what the Bible says about women alone is confusing, even just reading Paul's writing. So the black and white idea falls apart, in my opinion. And also, if you're trying to build a faith based on it, if any domino falls, the whole thing falls. That's my take on it.
I got it. Yeah, I was trying to confirm that with a I don't think I was clear.
It may not be possible. Dare I say, there are always exceptions. Take a seemingly simple question. Is killing another person a mortal sin? For many, the answer is obviously yes. It's a heinous thing to take another person's life. Which makes sense, and in most cases, for most people, saying killing is a mortal sin is completely uncontroversial. But what if it was an accident? What if the person we killed wanted to be killed, and so jumped in front of our car while we were driving? No.
He makes a pretty crazy, hypothetical here. He could just say, like, the more common one that is very controversial is just self-defense, right?
Yes.
Like
does he get into war?
Well, I mean, war might be an extension of self-defense in some ways, but within war, there's all kinds of atrocity. So I don't know.
Yeah, my point is,
I think he wanted to be
not black and white.
I think he wanted to make a clear distinction between something that was like, we would all be okay with it, right? Versus something that nobody would be okay with it. Like, yeah. But even then, I mean, I've had this discussion with folks before about, there really isn't any, objective morality based stuff, right? Like, right? I mean, if you're talking about murder, I mean, we have capital punishment, right? And in certain cases, I can understand the whole, You know, if you wanted to cherry pick the part of the Bible that was the eye for the eye, there are cases that I would understand that, right? You know, if it was like, you know, a brutal murder of a very innocent person, you know, and it's hard to be empathetic for somebody who would do, like, you know, rape a 3-year-old baby to death or something like that, you know. I mean, and these things happen,
Right.
right? So yeah, those kind of people, you know, it's hard to say, hey, all murder is wrong. Now, I'm of the capital punishment. I'm probably of the belief that none of it should be done, because I just think that there's too many cases that it's gone through with when it wasn't the right thing. So unfortunately, that means that even the ones that we are like 1,000% sure we've got on video, we've got your DNA evidence, everything else like that, you know, the only way to shut down not accidentally killing somebody that's innocent is to not do it at all.
Yeah. And also, if you, you know, the political argument for it is ridiculous too, because it actually ends up costing more money to
kill them than. Are you sure about that?
Well, some would argue that the answer to that then is you just don't give them as many appeals and things like that.
So you're saying that by the time, okay, like, yeah, so if they're on death row, they get a ton of appeals, because you want to be sure. And every time you do that, it costs the money to the taxpayer.
Right. The lawyers, the court cost, the cost of having them in a special place. And
so you're saying if that they were just like, you know, they would still have the appeals
in general
if it was,
population.
but they'd still have the appeals for if it was like life in prison, I think. Which you know, that life in prison
there are different appeals.
Yeah, I mean, let's be fair, I don't know enough about this part of our criminal justice system to make an accurate, like, assessment of it. But, you know, the death penalty, again, if I don't know if it's economically one way or the other. We can say simply, the only way that you don't kill an innocent person on accident is by not doing it at all.
Not killing anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from a moral standpoint, I just don't feel like I have the right to take somebody's life. So if I don't feel like I have the right to do that, then I don't want somebody else in that place either, even if they want to.
Sure. Again, but if we're going to the Bible, there is that eye for an eye thing, right?
Yeah, Jesus kind of annulled that. He said you've heard it said, an eye for a tooth, but I tell you, love your enemy.
This is true. He did say that. So what would you tell the person who has, like, you know, had like somebody's murdered their let's say their child, right? You have a grieving couple. A child was kidnapped and murdered, and they come to you with anger in their heart, and they say eye for an eye. And do you hit them with but Jesus said?
You know, I don't quote scripture at people that are in grief at that moment and try to correct them. That would be insensitive too.
Sure.
I think I think the reality is that you'd listen to them and you talk to them about, you know, what they're going through. And I've got a custodian now that his father was killed in an accident this past week. His father and his brother both, and there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Wait. So killed? What do you mean? How killed?
An 18-year-old was driving too fast and weaving in and out and hit them head on.
And did the 18-year-old survive?
The 18-year-old survived, yes.
And then you had two folks?
Two folks killed and another one injured and was in the hospital for.
And these are people that you know they're in your.
My custodian's father and brother were killed.
So not not members of the church, but still,
Correct.
that you employ the custodian, and
Yeah,
you
I have a lot
found.
of conversation with him,
Hmm. Well,
and he's angry.
have you pastored him in this way?
Yeah, mostly with him, I just try to listen, and honestly, he's the first one to say, you know, and I heard him say this just about 2 hours ago.
Hmm.
He said, you know, my family life has changed, and his father's gone and his brother's gone and all that stuff. But he also said, but this kid that did this, he's going to have to live with this the rest of his life.
Mm.
He actually has this sense of empathy about it.
That's a big way to think. Now, if it was murder, do you think he would be the same?
So,
Like out and out, like
right. So there's this
like
weird theory
intentional
that
first degree.
so there's this weird theory that his father's girlfriend was kind of a black widow, and it's not likely that she tried to do this to kill him, but the theory was, she was going to kill him for his money later on anyway, and that
Oh,
the you know,
so
and so if that was
this is part of the.
if that were if that were true, and I don't have any real evidence to say that it was, if that were true, how would he behave toward her? Would he have the same kind of empathy? I doubt it.
Sure.
He would probably now his family would want her dead, but I don't think he would. And he's a complicated person, but I think the reality though is, if you're dealing with somebody in that kind of grief, you deal with their grief.
Right.
Uh, uh, Anger is a part of grief, but you also have to talk to them about, let's focus on what you've lost, and focus on you, and trying to, know that no matter what terrible things going on, as a Christian pastor, I'm going to talk to them about that God never said, I'm going to fix everything if you become a follower. The Bible doesn't say that. What it says is, the whole message is, I'm going to be there with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the comfort for me, for them, would, if at least from a scriptural standpoint, would be, God is with us. God didn't ordain this to happen. God didn't ask this to happen. I don't believe this is part of God's plan, that his father and brother were killed in a tragic car accident. I don't buy that. I
Yeah,
did have a friend that,
the atheists have it a lot easier here than you would.
yeah, that's right.
I mean,
That's
because you have to start talking about God's plan in this regard.
Yeah, one of the things. So a long time ago, there was a pastor. He was a Baptist pastor in the community I was in, and we had a good relationship. He was involved in our ecumenical group, and his father and mother were both killed. They were in their 80s. They were both killed by getting hit by a semi in a car accident, and he had the funeral at the church where he was serving, which was a small church. And he invited all the pastors to come and sit on the chancel on the stage with him. He didn't ask us to do anything. He just asked us to sit up there with him in solidarity and be there with him. Well, after all this proceedings and all of that stuff was done, and a few weeks later, he was talking to the funeral director, who happened to be a member of my church. And they were talking about the very thing that people just don't know what to say when they're dealing with somebody with grief. And he said, a lot of people said it was a part of God's plan. They said this, they said that, or it's better they're in a better place. He said, I heard all the cliches I'd always heard, and said some of them myself, and I realized they were just falling flat. And he said, the only comforting words I heard were just the most basic, I'm sorry, I'm here, and I'm praying for you. And those were the only kind of words that anybody said to him that were comforting at all to him. He said, at the moment, that was not even that good for it. It was just not something that made me cringe every time somebody said it.
Right.
And so when you add in the murder con to what you're talking about. This guy never talked about the driver of the truck. That wasn't his concern. I don't know. I think uh, just because something is awfully tragic and someone did something very awful doesn't change the idea of the big picture stuff that we do. So when dealing with a family that is dealing with murder or suicide or any of the things that are very difficult for a family to go through, my job is not to encourage them want to take out the other guy or whatever.
Well, sure.
To get them
What kind of that's an interesting way to be a pastor. If you the pastor of revenge. Let's I was just saying how you would talk somebody down that was so angry, in that way. And then, even more difficult, I think, would be as we're talking, like if somebody came to you and said, how could this possibly be in God's plans?
Yeah.
That's hard, right?
And I would say I don't think that is in God's plan.
Okay. So
I think awful things happen.
So do you if you don't believe that like there's some kind of God's plan, right? So like how do you get to I don't believe it was God's plan? Like I'm so
how do you get to that it is God's plan?
Well, I guess the question is like, is it planless? Do you feel like there's no plans really?
So I've been wrestling with this idea about God's plan for a long time, and I hear people say that, and there's like one verse in one of Paul's writings that kind of mentions the idea that, and there's people that refer back to some Old Testament texts that said, "I knew you before you were born," and there's nothing that says I have a plan for every detail of your life. But then there's the other concept that's bigger, and that is the concept of free will. And
oh boy, you hold on, you're stepping in it right now, Ed. I mean, I'm sorry, I said Ed. Ed wants me to take off the kid gloves, and me and Ed have been talking about free will. So yeah, so you've been wrestling with the whole thing. So free will. I've been in heavy discussion over the last week with Ed here about free will. And
well, tell me about that.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about that?
Well, tell me what you're talking about.
Oh man, it's been pretty crazy. I'm gonna let Ed maybe chime in on stuff that I don't remember. Basically, if I were to summarize the 7-day conversation it felt like that me and Ed had over this, is that he doesn't even believe in free will, and I tend to agree with him. Except my view is that nothing has free will when you zoom far enough out. Ed's opinion is that he is a traveler in his body, that kind of just narrates the things that happens, and it seems like an illusion of free will. And he thinks that if you could rewind time, right, and if you knew every particle's positioning, right, then you could predict perfectly the future. If you were an entity that was all-knowing, omniscient, and you had you knew every particle trajectory, right, then you would everything would happen the same way it happened. I fall on the side of free will is exerted in much smaller ways, right? Like, for instance, one of the things that we had, we're going to get in the weeds on this, man. So one of the things that I was trying to say is free will is exhibited more in small actions instead of big actions. Because, again, ultimately, when you zoom out far enough, the sun's going to consume this planet. right?
Correct.
I can't stop myself from dying probably. Like there's a
Probably. I like that. I like your optimism.
oh man, it won't be me that's stopping it, right? It would have to be somebody else who
Yeah.
created the AI that creates the algorithm that figures out how to cure all disease in 10 years, like that guy on 60 Minutes said.
But aging is not a disease; it's a reality.
Right. So Ed believes that cause and effect is all there is, and that we're all made of atoms. I understand that, but what he's not understanding is that even on a molecular level, we have proof of random event, right? And if you can do it on a molecular level, even if you rewound everything, you couldn't get it right, even the second you restarted it. Right now, I think he's correct in the fact that there are cause and effects, but the thing is, we can control the time, supposedly, when we do things, right? So if I can control when I do something, I can also control if I do something, right? So for me, he's saying that this is more cause effect. This is about how you feel with like all the chemicals in your body and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, because I can counter that with like two different, stimuli, and I can pick one or the other. And you can say you can also say that everything is just a measurement of desire, which I do kind of agree with. But like you can also desire something and choose not to do something because there's a greater desire, which that's a counter, right? It's not necessarily like they're both desires, but it's still a counter, right? So it's more complicated and nuanced than that. But the point is, I think that there is cause and effect. You do get stimuli, and you do have like certain things that your body tells you, but then you get to control maybe how the electrons bounce.
So, if there is no free will,
Well, he also says that I agree with this too, that random isn't totally free. I understand
right?
that, but I'm not making random stuff. I'm having like, a reaction to the stimuli in one way or the other ways, and I can make a decision. So I don't buy it. I don't think time exists. There's only motion, right? So you can't rewind time. I think that's garbage in the first place. Even Einstein said that. He said time is an illusion. And he was a Mr. Relativity guy anyway. So, time is really important to what he was saying. But even Einstein said that.
So this is the old butterfly in the forest, and the rainforest flaps its wings and all this other stuff happens. So butterfly flapped its wings in the rainforest in Costa Rica, and that led to you clicking
the butterfly effect.
A mouse. Yeah, clicking a mouse that said, I'm going to go watch this.
Yeah,
I'm going to sit down at my desk. And I don't buy that.
I don't buy it either, because there's no way to know. I think random events occur, and while Ed might say, hey, that's not freedom, but it also frees us, right? So like I 100% can't have free will if everything is designed, but if things are random, it does free me up to it, and you can't deny it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I would say I agree that random doesn't mean free will, but I also know this: if you're basing it on the idea that we're made of atoms, just because you make this decision or that decision doesn't mean there's more or less atoms that all of you suddenly have made up. There's synapses and electrical impulses.
But nonetheless, Ed's theory falls on its face as soon as you realize that there's at a molecular level, you can't rewind atoms and put it back out, because it would just molecularly, it would be different every time. Even if you could.
I watch quite a bit of sci-fi. And first off, I always hate when they do time travel, because it's just not possible. Secondly, when they do,
time isn't real.
Yeah, if they're going to a different dimension, Star Trek did the terrible. All of a sudden, I can't think of it. They went to the Terran Empire and all that. It's always interesting when they do this different dimension stuff, how similar the dimension is in the other place to, New York City's different, but they use blimps instead. And see if anybody got that reference. And but then the same people are there, but that's not how that would work. If you make
maybe, I don't know.
Well, for instance, using Star Trek as the example, and when they did the mirror universe stuff, the way that the hierarchy changed on the ship was, you killed the captain, you got to be the captain. So once you start killing people, then genetics changes, and this person got killed, so they're at a different time.
There could be a pathway that, like, it just doesn't occur for, like, if somebody's killed in Australia in 1936, it's not going to affect the person in 1954 in Spain, right? Like it doesn't have to intersect, these butterfly effects.
Yeah, but in a mirror universe where you're talking about different dimensions, they always imply that the same people exist in that dimension that in the other one, and that's just nuts.
Well, I would think it'd work more like that. Like, if we were, depending on when, and me and Ed talked about this, like, predictions are easier the closer they are, right? So, random. I think, okay, so to put it like this, I think free will is best represented by, like, it may look like a random event if we were to study it in terms of how maybe, like, molecules move, right? But I think there's a point of yes or no that nobody can know until it happens, right? Now, you might be able to, you can't, I guess what I'm saying is, you can't predict when the yes or no is going to happen, right? In any decision, right? I guess I'm saying this in a weird way. So you get to a point of decision, right? We'll call it the point of decision. What you can't predict is if the point of decision is ever going to happen. And if you can't predict that, then you can't predict the when either. So within these frameworks, you have control, right? So you have a small measure of control. So free will is actually measured by the little control that we do have, right? Because we do have more control than, like a dog, right? So to me, free will is measured in small, like the small minutiae of, like, how things can be different, right? And how we influence our own decisions. Because there's no way, in my mind, unless, see, Ed just feels like, again, that it's all just a big narration, right? Like, I get these, stimuli, and I just respond to them, and then my head says, this is what's happened, and therefore I think it's a decision, right? But I don't buy that.
I understand what you're saying, Ed. I do kind of understand that. There's this other part that led to this in the first place is, does God have a plan that deals with minutia about every single person's life at every moment?
Right.
So that car that drove by that was red, inspired to, if a blue car had been driven by, God would have been meaning something else. That just doesn't make sense to me either. And so I'm gonna still lean on the idea that I have the ability to, and keep in mind, I have a degree in psychology, so I'm going to probably lean on that. And in psych, we talk about the fact that you do have, you make your own choices. I think sometimes I hear therapists or people in some realm of therapy that are saying, well, you made a choice about everything. You can choose to be happy. You can choose to be this. And then I think they go too far sometimes. But I think that, is it possible that I knew I was going to be a pastor before I made the decision to? Yeah, it's possible. I think
conscious
that God,
well, real quickly, Ed, I think conscious thought works much differently than what that works like. Like, problem solving doesn't work in these same kind of, like, lanes that you're saying.
I think that I was saying earlier.
Yeah, conscious thought
Did,
just lives in a different place. So
did God really plan for me to use a purple Yeti mug to drink my tea in
while
tonight?
you're wearing a purple shirt,
Yeah, well, that is God's plan, but
but but
no,
again,
I chose
let's get back
I
to it.
chose the purple mug. I chose the purple mug because somebody gave me a purple mug, and this keeps my tea hot while I'm sitting here.
So let's get back to it. Let
All
somebody
right.
comes in and says, "How could this be God's plan that I've suffered this tragedy?" What do you say?
I would say what I said before. I'm going to listen to, tell me why you think
Mm-hmm.
that. I'm going to uh, um, might even ask what would it mean if that wasn't a part of God's plan. Um, I think that as a pastor in that situation, a pastoral care situation, where somebody's dealing with that level of grief and that level of anger, my job isn't to guide them to believe what they want to believe about it. It's to help them talk through it and maybe offer different perspectives, but not ever to tell them yes this or no that. My custodian and I were chatting earlier out across the creek. Um, Long story. Uh, so we're sitting there talking about across the creek, and we got to talking about uh, different things beyond his situation, and I think that there's a lot of things that are tragic and awful that people go through. That what they need from a pastor, what they need from a therapist, what they need from and I'm not a therapist. Let me be clear about that. I have a degree in psychology, but I don't have a
You didn't
master.
do the yeah.
Yeah, I am not, and I believe strongly in the professionalism of that field. I also have a degree in sociology, so go from there. But I think that you just have to be pastoral in that moment, and
When you say pastoral, you mean just like, hey, let me guide and comfort and but
yeah,
you wouldn't hit them with the Lord works in mysterious ways, would you?
God no, I'm not going to hit them with any cliches. Is what I'm trying to avoid. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sorry Ed about the YouTube. We it was a disaster when I tried to fix that. But yes, I think maybe we should move on from this, even though I could get in the weeds about this stuff, as Ed
Yeah.
can attest, for a week of talking, and there's
Well,
a
you
lot of
artists,
yeah a lot of folks are struggling with free will, and especially yeah, I can listen.
and let me.
I don't. Here's the thing about me as an atheist. When Ed says we don't have free will, I'm like, yeah, that's plausible.
See, it's funny. The funny thing to me is that as this is where the atheist and the Christian perspective on free will is probably somewhat different. I'm baffled that you think that there's no free will. If we're keep in mind when we're talking about the idea that God planned for the car accident or God had a plan for the murder of somebody,
Mm. Well, there would
and I
definitely
said no, there's no.
if it's 100% that time is linear, and then if there was an entity out there that could know every trajectory of every molecule, even through the random nature of the movement of electrons, right? That we just don't really understand. Maybe we just don't understand it, and we can predict it in the future. This is part of quantum stuff, right? So if that were the case, we would definitely not have free will.
So again, for me, if you're talking about the idea that God has a plan for every minutia of people's lives, that seems unreasonable to
It's
me.
not
And it
even
also
it's not even a plan at that point. It's just to say that, like, what's going to happen is going to happen.
well, and so this is where you're saying there's no free will because if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen.
It's the
It's not.
bowling ball has been rolled, right?
It is. It's basically you just define fate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of like But with no free will, you wouldn't have free will if it was like every chemical is just you're just, if Ed is correct, then we're just narrating something that was always going to happen, right?
Right. And Ed, I agree with you that no free will, no free will doesn't mean that an agent is planning everything. But I, from a Christian perspective, when we talk about free will, it does mean that. It means that if somebody doesn't have free will, then it's because God has preordained it.
Because
And so
God is omnipotent in this case, right?
Right. This is Calvinist views are that predestination exists and that everything was predestined by God.
What's up,
to, that everything was predestined by God. Therefore, you can't change anything. You can't make a change in your life. Most of us don't buy into the predestination kind of ideas. And I agree again, you're saying that free will in the way you're seeing it doesn't mean there's a plan. But for Christians, again, the debate has always been between the idea of predestination, where I don't have a choice on anything, or that I do have a choice. The sins that I do, the things that I do that harm other people are my choice. I can choose to be harmful or I can choose to be loving. And those are choices that I make. You're talking about some theory about a molecular vision, and that theory is no more based in reality than what you would say the theory of predestination and or faith would say. And I get the Big Bang theory that and as I have no reason to disagree with the Big Bang theory, that things were set in motion and all of that. But I don't know that the Big Bang theory knew that I would have a one of these on my desk, which I know you know what that is. It's
right?
a HDMI adapter.
Again, I think, if we're talking about your Star Trek and you're like, why are these the same people there? Well, I think the idea behind that is like, okay, let's say, oh man, we're about to talk about the multiverse. So a Big Bang occurs, right? Let's not try to do the multiverse yet, but like, the big events are going to be the same, right? If everything happens the same in this one particular moment. So like, the trajectory of the, our solar system, which is which is in a galaxy, from the Big Bang, the trajectory of it moving from the Big Bang, and that's how we know the Big Bang occurred, is just because we see the movement of galaxies away from each other, right?
The expansion,
The expansion, right? We know that there was a singularity, a center point of this happening. This is the first chance that we can actually say, hey, this is the first recorded history. We don't know what was before that, right? Now, there are people out there who will say, well, this is just the beginning. We found the beginning.
That's right. And I watched Star Trek Discovery, and I saw the last episode of that. Sorry for a spoiler if anybody actually cares. And they'd been chasing this last season, this whole set of clues that led them to this place where they were going to meet the progenitors, which were supposed to be the people that created life. And once she gets there and she meets the progenitor that's there, the progenitor says, no, we didn't make all this. Somebody else made this before us. And we don't know. Maybe somebody made this before them. We don't know how far back this goes, And if we think of infinity and all of that, the Big Bang may have been after a whole nother cycle of that. Everything condensed back down and then blew up again, and condensed back down and blew up again. Trillions and trillions and trillions of years.
And there is people that think that I think most people think that what's going to happen is the big chill. I just don't think that we can know this, if I'm being completely honest. Right. And I'm just never going to be willing to God of the gaps that thing. Like every time we search
God of the gaps.
Are you not familiar with that phrase in
I've heard it.
atheism? So when
I've heard the word, but I don't know what it means.
well,
Sorry.
God of the gaps. The easiest way to describe that is when somebody says, "The Lord works in mysterious ways." Right. So what you're doing there is you're
When
not
something can't be explained.
So to fill in the gap, you put God.
Yeah, when something can't be explained, you just say God did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me either.
And you're the pastor. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know that we have to. I think we try to if we don't understand something, this is what. If we don't understand something, suddenly we try to make it some supernatural thing, and I don't know. It just doesn't help me feel more connected to anything. Um, I'm going to watch this segue. What separated Pope Francis from the other pope I remember, which isn't that many, obviously, we're not that old. Um, what separated Pope Francis was his humanity. You know, he began by going to poor people and washing their feet.
right.
There was a video of him on CNN that was from early on in his papacy, and there was a man who just was covered in sores and he came up and without hesitation touched the man, held him, where everybody else was repulsed by him. This was worse than, I mean, the guy was just covered in, he had a genetic disease that caused this condition that he had. Um, it that's where I find God, is in that place. I don't. I think
You
that.
find God in kind acts.
I mean, for me, just scripturally, in First John, and I know you've heard me preach on this before when you were youths.
I was a Ute. The two Utes.
Yeah, that's right. The two youths. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what I was going for. Uh, when in First John chapter 4, we hear God is love, and for me, the existence of love is real, and we see it in kindness, we see it in gentleness, we see it in uh, we even see it in nature, and by that I mean, I have had a number of people over the years that'll turn to me and say, "Oh, I don't go to church, but I go out in the woods and commune with God," and I can't argue with that.
The people that were just
You
like,
know,
I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
oh, I hate that phrase. And the reason I hate it is because let's be clear. What spiritual seems to mean is that I it's basically some sort of symbolism. So
I
it's no
disagree with
different
that.
than religion. It tends to not be anything different than religion is. When I hear people talk about something being spiritual, they often give a meaning to some physical thing, whether it's a stone or one lady. This was a very spiritual event we went to. We had these teacups, and this teacup reminds me of that. And we put meaning and value on things that become symbols to us. They become a symbol of a connection we have. So you disagree? Go ahead.
Well, okay. As you finish the thought, I don't disagree with all of it. I disagree with that spirituality means you put like you ascribe some kind of value to an object. Like I think it just tends to be more like reverence for something greater. And you don't know what it is, but hey, you're here and you live. Like the people that I know have been like, spiritual, like hippies they're actually a much less materialistic. The people that I take seriously on this stuff now, they do tend to like crystals, Billy.
Exactly.
But no, I'm just saying they're not all like that. I'm just saying some people are spiritual in the way that like I can't. The reality is that every human religion, there's some crap in it. You're just like, I don't buy that, right?
Yeah, and for me, when somebody says I'm spiritual and not religious, I think, okay, you're not a part of organized religion, but you have your own religious practices.
Not necessarily, because religious practices means, like, to me, like doctrine and whatever. Some people are just
No,
like,
it
they're just feeling
it means
reverence for the they're just feeling reverence for the greater. It's not really a religious practice.
I would argue that it really means some sort of ritual in your life. It doesn't mean doctrine at all. It means
Interesting. So you
I
think that
like
ritual would have to be a part of it?
ritual is what is where religion comes in
Okay.
people's lives. The rituals, there's so much meaning in ritual, and if your ritual is to go and sit by a stone in the woods, that's religion. It's not any less religious than somebody being a part of an organized religion. The difference is we own that it's a ritual and say this is what we're doing. We're coming to have this ritualistic moment, and our rituals have been defined and honed and all of that stuff. And then I find, I had a lady in my church on Easter morning. She's arguing with me that about how we're doing something, and I'm like, I'm. She says, "Well, I'm just traditional." I said, "Well, the tradition we're doing is something that's more older than you." And she wanted to do it her way, is what she really wanted. But
Sure.
I think,
My tradition.
I'm so I hate the phrase I'm spiritual, not religious, because it it seems to make a demarcation that I don't think is that big of a demarcation. It just, if they want to say I'm more involved in my spirituality through rituals that I participate in by myself or with a small group without the other stuff, and I'm not into organized religion, I get that, and I certainly understand it, and I have people in my churches over the years. One currently that she comes to church pretty regularly, not every Sunday. Her husband comes way more than does. They're artists. They're involved in hike. They hike. They love being outside in nature. They're retired now, so they're doing more of that. And I have a great deal of empathy for what she told me, and what he told about her, which is she's really kind of had it with organized religion.
Sure. I
And
had
I
a
absolutely understand that.
I had a guy try to convince me at a guitar store that I was still religious. um, because he said you just fell out of love with churchianity. Churchianity.
That's a great line.
And I was like, no, that's not it. But I get why you want to feel that way. So Asteria said, okay, so you mentioned that you feel like
I'm reading that, yeah.
you're feeling that like God's love is the evidence you need for this, right? And God's love is evidenced through human action. Is that how you were trying to like kind of put that, or am I getting that wrong? Billy. Billy was reading. Billy was reading.
I'm not sure I understood your sentence.
Okay. So you said earlier that God's love,
I said love.
Love, not God's love. Well, I was saying God's love, but maybe love. But love, because love exists, and it is shown through people, right? This is this is a express. Okay, and then Osteria says, I feel like forgiveness is a very human. I guess it's a human sort of thing. Honestly, forgiveness.
Thing that makes me think there might be gods or religious thing is forgiveness.
Like forgiveness exists. You said love exists, so is forgiveness.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's love, because you can forgive somebody.
Let me tell you.
You know.
Let me tell you a real story. A friend of mine who lives down in Knoxville was in seminary with me, and he shared this with a group of us. He was meeting with his pastor as he was going through the process to become a pastor himself. We have a whole process. Sitting down with his pastor, he was having lunch with him that day, or not lunch, but he was having a time with him before lunch. While they're meeting, the pastor got a phone call. The phone call was about the person that my friend was about to go and have lunch with, a longtime friend of his. And they were going to get together and have lunch. She was killed that morning in a drunk driver.
Oh my gosh! So they were going to have lunch the next day or something like that, and this was
in the next hour. In the next hour, they were
in the
going to have
next
lunch.
hour.
So he got the word that she had been killed, and this, drunk driver hit her and killed her. To shorten the story, he was bitterly angry at the drunk driver, as was, of course, her parents. And he was trying to deal with that grief and found that the place of healing for him was to go to the jail or the prison, whichever I think he'd been convicted by this point. So it wasn't like in the week, it wasn't a month later, it was within the year, though. He went and offered that driver forgiveness. I said to him, I don't know how you did that. But
I mean,
it was a part of his own healing. And I think what Osteria says is that's what,
yeah,
that's
I think a
that's
lot
powerful.
of listen. It's powerful stuff. I don't see
Yeah.
a deity in this. I just see a natural human process, and in some ways, I think Ed might have the best take on this. I think that they go hand in hand, the stimuli and how our thoughts kind of intertwine with the stimuli and stuff like that. So eventually we get to our own personal conscious decisions about things. There are plenty of unconscious decisions, to kind of riff on what we were doing before with the free will stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't see deity in the existence of love, and I don't see deity in the existence of forgiveness, because I also see the opposites of those in full force. Now, there are some folks out there that would say you would not know one without the other. So, I understand. Yeah, I understand that argument, but then I would say, well, then why does the system exist with so much suffering in the first place?
So let me ask you a question that I've been asked as a pastor, and I ask you that question to a different perspective, which is,
sure,
does evil and good exist?
Does evil and good exist?
Yeah, do evil and good both exist?
Well, we were talking about this, objective morality thing a little bit earlier. I would say not objectively, no.
Okay, so in other words, things just are, which would make sense from your perspective.
No, I just think that there's.
I mean, if you go by Ed's theory, things are just what they are because of the atoms and the energy.
Yeah, no,
that's
I don't believe in. We've already gotten past. I don't believe Ed has it right. Now, I think Ed has some good points. I do. Yeah. I do think Ed has some good points. I don't.
Sure.
If it's an illusion, boy, it's a hell of an illusion. You know what I mean? Because eventually I got to a point where it's like, I'm going to do a podcast, and like, holy shit, if you could predict that from the Big Bang, right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Random events have occurred within then, and like, if one of those random events had occurred before, like let's just say shortly after the Big Bang, we might not even have life on Earth, right?
That's right.
Right. So like, if the if the event that happened that made life on Earth happen happened just at a different time because of randomness, we might not have life on Earth. So, anyway, that's neither here nor there. Your question was, I'm sorry, I kind of got lost in the weeds on this. Your question was,
does good and evil exist? And
does good and evil
no.
exist? And I'm saying, not objectively. Like, I don't think there's. Well, okay, so I'm gonna have to talk about my nihilism a little bit. Nihilism is something that's zoomed way out, right? If that makes sense. Like, it's a nihilistic point of view would definitely fall in line with everything that's going to happen is just going to happen, and you don't have free will, and nothing matters, right? Ultimately, like, nothing matters. We're just fertilizer, right? So, like, once I zoom far enough out, it's everything is, as you say, it just is, right? When we get
but not if you zoom in.
When we get to the human condition, we can definitely start talking about good and evil. But even if we were to go further on, and Ed and I both watch a lot of Alex O'Connor will make the point of, why is the system so harsh? Right? Like, so is it good or evil that a lion kills a baboon for food? Right?
Yeah, that's right.
If
no.
And if God set up this system, when he could have just said everything eats plants, or just, he's God, he can do anything, right? This is where we find a problem with even, like, the existence of God, because we see just events of what we could describe as good or evil, right? But they're just there. It looks like there's no sentient force behind it, no reason, nothing. So for us, good and evil, it might have some nuance behind it. Again, we talked about capital punishment, right?
Yeah.
We talked about self-defense. So let's take for instance, a piece of shit, George Zimmerman, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
If we're doing the work, I bet you for real that George Zimmerman was actually scared.
Because of his, yeah.
Now
I understand that.
he put himself in the position.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean he wasn't legitimately scared, right? So now, what is the situation here? Is he completely evil? Because what he did to me, we could look at as, that's an evil act. He provoked the situation. He messed with a kid who had a bag of Skittles or whatever it was he had, and then got in a fight with him and then shot him, right? Like, all these events are his fault. But in the moment, I can probably empathize with a very scared person who whipped himself up into this frenzy and is scared, and it's his fault. So, like, if we can even measure, like, what's more evil and what's not evil, and then, if we talk about the Bible on it, what do they say about sin? What is it? Is one greater than the other in the Bible?
Oh, yeah, that's not one understanding I would have from the scripture either. This sin is greater than the other than, the concept of blasphemy.
Could we do a tier list? Yeah, blasphemy actually says the most one of all, right? Blasphemy. But, like, right. In the Bible, it kind of says there isn't one versus the other. But there is a discussion. There's a lot of gray area.
There is a discussion about mortal sin and sin that isn't mortal, and I think a genuine interpretation of that is sin that causes death versus sin that doesn't cause death. But again, that still doesn't really demarcate which ones they're talking about. So,
Mm-hmm.
I
I mean,
sneezed and caused someone, you know,
I mean, you could make arguments for all kinds of stuff too. Like, so, like,
you could.
even you could make an argument that murder is less of a sin than rape. If you wanted to talk about a victim that has to live through something forever, right? Like, if you murder somebody, they're dead. If you rape somebody, they're living through that for their entire life.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, we might have different value sets on that, right? So Ed says, objective morality doesn't exist outside of what we create as a cooperative. And I agree with that. But we also, as humans, we create exceptions, and, life is complicated.
Yeah. And we as human beings need other human beings in order to survive.
So to answer your question, if we can't even get to like the most basic level of, is this good or bad, then we can't even get to the point of whether good or evil exists.
So the interesting thing is that the reason I asked that is I get asked that, not like a weekly beta thing. I do get asked that question, and it's a very difficult question to answer. And then what triggered me to ask you that was the idea that people will say, well, you can't have one without the other. That we can't appreciate good if
you
we
can't
don't
appreciate
have
good without bad. That's the apologist answer.
I agree with that. I certainly agree with that. The apologist answer is the right answer. I think that suffering that is caused by human beings is due to free will. Yes, I do think that's the case. But there's a lot of suffering that happens that's not caused by human beings. Intentionality.
Not even, but again, the system that we have,
That's
there's suffering.
Something Ed says.
There's suffering that exists outside of the human condition as well, right?
Yes, I probably agree with that.
Something for me to live, this is how it goes. If I want to live, something has to die.
Animal, vegetable, or mineral, something has to die. That's right.
Even beyond that, like you can just go down the chain. How did this, something probably died for the crop that I had to, if I mean just vegetables, there's probably something that died along the way.
That's right. Yeah.
Outside of outside of a vegetable, even that's what I'm saying. We
took away an environment.
Yeah, exactly. So if I clear out a swamp to make a dwelling, I've maybe killed a bunch of things, right? So in order for me to live, something has to die. That was a hard. That's a hard pill to swallow if you're a kid thinking about this.
Yeah.
So
I think.
Am I evil because I exist? I guess that's original sin, I guess,
So I think that one of the things that comes into play then is intentionality. Do I intend to do something that I know will harm somebody? Because I think, like you said, when we're talking about murder, if murder is literally just killing another human being, some would argue that murder doesn't mean that murder means having the intent to kill somebody. But if you did it unintentionally, even our laws today distinguish between first-degree murder, I intended and planned out and went after somebody, and manslaughter, or even involuntary manslaughter. I was driving a car and there was an accident and I was negligent, and therefore I'm guilty of involuntary manslaughter. But I think when we talk about, Ed was asking about, does sin lead to all the suffering? First off, no. There's a lot of suffering, as you just said earlier, that isn't caused by decisions we make. It is, natural disasters exist and suffering exists, and sure, we could not build our home near places that are going to flood. you don't think that the people in North Carolina and East Tennessee thought that a hurricane was ever going to hit their place, and they were on the side of a mountain, they'd be impacted by a flood? No, you don't.
Right.
Um,
But
so
the apologist would say, the Lord works in mysterious ways and sent a hurricane into Appalachia in order for people to know pain so they could know good.
Yeah. And also because maybe somebody there in the right way that fits their political agenda.
That's the what was his name? 700 Club guy.
Yeah, Pat Robertson.
Pat Robertson. Yeah, he'd tell any natural disaster. He didn't think about his own situation, how rich he is, where he lives, like the conditions that led to his success or whatever.
The earthquake in Haiti, he blamed it on some voodoo ritual that happened in a century ago or more, and
I wish, what I wish that the Catholic Church would do, since we have, wow, this is a 13-minute video and we haven't even watched it yet. But I wish the Catholic Church would just excommunicate people that aren't even in the Catholic Church and just say they did, just to piss people off. I wish after he said that, the Catholic Church would have been like, we excommunicate Pat Robertson. And he could have just been pissed about it, but it would have been funny. Because golly, what a shitty Christian, right?
Yeah. So I said that, I talked about that in a sermon back then.
You said Pat Robertson's a shitty Christian in a sermon?
I said he was wrong.
Okay, got you.
I said in no unequivocal terms, Pat Robertson made this claim, and that is wrong, and it is mean-spirited to say that while these people are suffering from death and destruction.
Probably painted with a little bit of racism there. He may not even known he was doing it because he's old.
You mean like Springfield or wherever the town was that was eating dogs?
Well, I think that was more intentional, but Pat Robertson's old people sometimes, like my grandmother, their shittiness would comes out as they get old. And
he was that way long before he got old.
That's true.
But so I said that, and there was a guy in my pews that day said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because that's not how God works."
So in this situation, you did the Pope Benedict thing, and you just shut it down.
I just said it's not how God works. I believe God loves the people in Haiti. They're created in God's image, and
so God has no control over storms.
And it is.
Is that what we're getting out of this?
I'm saying that's this idea that he picked something out of the history of Haitians that nobody living on that island of Hispaniola was a part of. And somehow God chose 80, 90, 100 years later to take the island out. That BS, just doesn't make any sense.
I was in my discussion with Ed the other day, because we're both atheists, and we have a lot of heated discussions over many topics. But this is actually one of our more fun conversations, free will and whatnot.
I agree, Asteria.
Again, I think we're all fertilizer. Eventually, that's good for something, right?
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But also, when we do Ash Wednesday service, we see, from the dust you have come, to the dust you shall return. That's a part of our ritual.
I guess there's some Buddhist reincarnation in there. So I lost my train of thought because I got. No, it's okay. It probably wasn't important. Let's get back to the video, because we are.
There's a video?
Flailing. We are 6 minutes and 38 seconds into this Pope Francis. I thought this was going to be like 40 minutes, 30 minutes.
Well, you're the one that said free will doesn't exist.
Yeah, and here we are freely just deciding to go off my plan. The Lord's plan that
you
was
had
told to
1, 2,
me that
3,
we would
4,
have.
5. You have 5 tabs open waiting for the next step.
Well, these tabs right here, 3 of them, well, 2 of them were to run the show. One of them was supposed to be a YouTube thing, but then the YouTube thing went a little wonky.
Okay, so only 2 more. Only 2 more.
Yeah, let's see. Then we have this one, and yeah. So let's try to get through the Pope Francis stuff. It has really led to an interesting conversation. It was nothing about Pope Francis, really. But let's do it.
Except just humanity.
Yeah.
No one in the right mind would put fault on the driver in that situation. Before we can propose any moral absolutes, we have to consider one's intention, the actor's freedom, the circumstances of the situation, lots of different factors. We have to understand that these aren't just principles, they're complex human beings acting in complex human situations. When we do that, what we find is that even seemingly clear-cut situations aren't always black and white, but various shades of gray. For those who want to argue that Pope Francis has brought ambiguity to issues like marriage, sexuality, communion, immigration, the afterlife, and so on, this is a big reason why. It's because he does not speak in absolutes. He does not approach these issues with a one-size-fits-all solution. He does not try to come up with simple answers for complex problems. Rather, he has repeatedly called us to see the person, not just the issue, to look for those who are left outside, on the margins, to understand that the law is meant to serve the life of the gospel, not the other way around. Everyone loves justice, but few have time for mercy. Sometimes our demand for clarity, for easy answers, misses part of the problem. Francis is willing to sit in the ambiguity. He's okay with answers that are incomplete and open-ended, because sometimes that's the way the world works. For those struggling with this, I invite you to spend more time with people than ideas. I invite you to seek out those struggling with moral issues and to listen to their stories. It's not about sentimentalism or being soft on the law. It's about remembering that no law can fully capture the human experience. There might be a nuance, an exception, a shade of gray that we've forgotten. And so, poor catechesis, a leadership style that is unfamiliar, a theological approach that shies away from easy answers. These are understandable, innocent, and largely fixable problems. In a community of patience and love seeking truth and wisdom, none of these should keep us apart for long. We may not agree, but we can understand. And yet here we are. Here we are growing ever more divided, indicating that there is yet another factor at play, one that is not necessarily patient or loving. If you ask me, the number one reason that Pope Francis's pontificate has been marked by confusion is because of this: the ill will of his enemies. For a moment, step out of the world of Catholicism and into the world of American politics. What's the state of discourse these days? How's it been going the last decade or so? We have men and women who are so stubborn that they refuse to accept even the most obvious achievements of their enemies.
Presidency.
Attack ads that intentionally mislead, even lie to hurt another person. False narratives that continue to circulate even years after they've been debunked. We have people who refuse to accept facts, who prefer conspiracy theories to testimonies of experts, and are willing to say anything and support anyone to get their moment in the spotlight. Unfortunately, the Church is not immune to these attitudes. Despite the call to evangelize the world, there are many in our church that are as much of the world as any politician. On a routine basis, I see lies, conspiracy theories, misrepresentations, unfounded accusations, and shameless cries for attention from people in the Catholic world aimed against Pope Francis. When you have a church struggling with the first 3 points, honest problems that can even occur in people of goodwill, the words of people like Taylor Marshall, Michael Voris, Archbishop Vigano, Raymond Arroyo, Cardinal Burke, and Patrick Coffin are pure gasoline on a fire. They present themselves as coming from a place of concern, as legitimate sources of Catholic authority, but...
So he's calling out a bunch of names right here that, I had to look up a little bit, and this is where I got to this right here, but these are the people that potentially are people that could possibly be...
Okay. Contenders.
Right? Contenders, and... So some of these that he mentioned are just people that would say, "I am," like, this is why he was saying, like, some popes just said you can shut up or get the stick, right? Whereas he was more like, let's talk about it. But that allowed people to have voices, where Christianity is growing really fast, like in Africa, right? Um,
Yeah.
so you have like a Ghanaian pope who would, to my surprise after studying this, would not be the first black pope. I didn't know that.
That's correct.
And
Leo was it one of the Leos? I don't know.
yeah, I've not studied. I don't know much about the Pope lore and Pope history. I know
Yeah.
in this article I read that they said there's expected. They suspect up to 3, right? But that what there wasn't like confirmation on that. So anyway, draconian anti-homosexuality, right? For him, and then like he is
Right.
joined by Cardinal Robert Serra from Guinea, who's positioned himself as a parallel authority to Pope Francis. Man,
Wow, that's bold
it is bold.
in a hierarchy
But so-
hierarchy like that.
But that's what, yeah, in a hierarchy like the papacy, right? But nonetheless, this part of the video, I was like, who are these people? So I just wanted to give a little context there.
But all they're doing is creating confusion and discord themselves. Why is there so much confusion surrounding Pope Francis? Because men like this say there is. Because men like this do not like Pope Francis and want to do anything they can to undermine him, even if it means spreading lies and hurting the church. Now, this is not to say that there are no legitimate criticisms of his pontificate or that one has to agree with everything Pope Francis says. Clearly, this is not the way authority works, and as I've already pointed out, Francis is better at tolerating this than his predecessors. But I'm not talking about a difference of ecclesiology here. I'm not talking about disagreements held in good faith. I'm talking about the intentional and deceitful attempts by some to discredit Pope Francis for their own personal gain. And unfortunately, they're pretty successful at this. They've created a large
Power plays happen in your church too, right?
Every day.
Every day? I didn't expect that answer. I just felt like you're like, yeah, I can remember a time when this was like this, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so every day.
Well, at every level, there's, like I said, on Monday morning, I had a lady who was trying to, get me to change something at the last second
Right.
to fit her need for her thing to be the way she used to it, is used to it. And her argument was, well, that's traditional. And I'm like, yeah, well, this is older than tradition. And so I see it on that level. Certainly in the United Methodist Church, because of the challenges we've had in the last few years that have really been going on for 50 years, people have been jockeying themselves to try to gain power here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, right now in Africa,
and some have more hardline opinions on homosexuality and women in the clergy, and
yeah, that's right. And Methodists tend to all think women in clergy is a natural thing. I don't know how it feels in Africa, but there are African women clergy that are respected. But in Africa right now, what we're seeing is that the group that left the United Methodist Church because of their hardline stance on homosexuality and other conservative political views, they are, let's just say, behaving badly. There's violence. They're trying to steal churches by legal trickery and
sounds like the church to me.
It's just despicable. It's anything but Christian,
Right.
first of all, and they're threatening people, and it's just awful. And they tell us we're not Christian because we don't believe they believe, or we don't hold that as more dear than anything else. I mean,
Sure.
there are many folks who are conservatives who are proudly still United Methodist.
United in hate.
No, they're united because they understand there's bigger issues. John Wesley said, in basically he said, I can't get the quote in my head right now. In things that are, we're going to disagree on a lot of things, but in the essentials, let's agree. And
But they're not
and
agreeing on the essentials, is what I'm saying. Like, but because of that, they unite in something else, the non-essentials, which is hate. Right. So
yeah, I would. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought you were calling us that. You know,
No. I wouldn't have had
yeah.
anything to do with you if that was the case. No. I
You
mean,
have
like,
that-
I was saying, like, you know, they're behaving badly, right? They
Yeah.
put up the moniker of, you know, what maybe Jesus love is supposed to be, right? They might do that. They might even use it as a shield for their bad behavior, in which that's the stuff that really bothers me. That happens in the U.S. too, though. That's not like a.
Oh, and here too, but not the
But
the
not to that
violence.
level of violence, yeah. The killing
Yeah,
in the name, but listen, killing in the name of happened in the U.S. for years.
the killing in the name of religion, period, has happened centuries.
Yeah,
Ever.
I'm just saying we're you know, like we're better about it now, but it wasn't that long ago.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. All right, let's finish this guy.
Following of people that would rather believe them than the Pope. And it makes me wonder why? How did we get here? And I wonder if maybe it's because our world as a whole is in such a state of confusion that people want to latch on to the people who take the most absolute stances. The ambiguity of the world is just too much for some people to handle, and so they'll take clarity even at the cost of reason. I don't know. What I do know, though, is this. Pope Francis is a good man. He is a holy leader. His teachings are orthodox and his exhortations inspirational. Is he the leader that everyone wants? Probably not. Does he have some flaws? Absolutely. But that doesn't make him confusing. It doesn't make him a heretic. And it most certainly does not make him a false pope. But maybe you're unconvinced by my words. Maybe you truly do find Pope Francis to be confusing and problematic, and you kind of like those people I mentioned. What do we do then? In these situations, I'd invite you to consider changing the source of your news, at least for a little while, to something a little more balanced, a little more mainstream maybe. I invite you to read his own words. Start with Evangelii Gaudium and Gaudete et Exsultate, and discuss them with people you know. Come with an open mind, with a true Catholic disposition that trusts in the Holy Spirit, and look for the truth that you can find. Because really, if this is too much to ask, if you are unwilling to approach the teachings of the Pope with an open mind and heart, if you openly denounce him or his teachings, I'm very sorry to hear that, but never fear, for you will not be alone. The Church has had many people throughout history who undermine the authority of the Pope and instead follow charismatic leaders on the fringes. Enjoy your new church that you're creating.
Well, you know, new churches have been created there, Father, throughout history. I don't hold so much contempt for them in that little voice, but I agree with you in holding contempt for the, in some ways. But anyway, so Billy, any last thoughts on Pope Francis, and maybe even a last thought on free will?
I was trying to read Asteria's comment.
Oh, yeah,
there.
let's see what we got. He put a big old one there. Yeah, well, the Catholic Church is certainly enormous.
Yeah, it is. It and has immense power around the world in a lot of ways. But
Asteria, I would say this: if you get a chance, I don't know if you've been here the whole time. At the beginning part of the video, Father Casey here talks about a lot of church members not knowing some of the more progressive moves that it's just made, right? So like people are not aware. They were like, well, this church right here, or this Pope is very progressive and it's confusing. But the reality is that he was going along with a lot of the more progressive moves that had been made throughout the history of the Catholic Church over the last 50 years, is what he said. So yeah,
he said it with a lot of Latin words.
Right. So when you say that Catholic Church is so big, the majority of people are part of that live in the countries that favor conservative values. I would say it's probably yes and no in some ways. I mean, like, you would maybe know better, but you're in Finland, right? So I guess that'd be like Michigan and Florida if we were to talk like
Yeah.
Italy,
I
because
think,
Italy is obviously where the Pope resides. But I would think that Italy, being a part of Western Europe, is still more progressive in nature, even with, I guess, Le Pen. Is that who's that, or is that, I can't remember who it is that's in. They have a right wing. Doesn't Italy have a
yeah,
right
but
wing? It's not Le Pen, is
Marine
it?
Le Pen did not win. No, she didn't win.
That's France anyway. I'm thinking of who is it?
So,
Nonetheless,
so there's
yeah.
so much going on right now. It's hard to keep up with who's
But
been
I
winning.
guess what I'm saying is they have central health, centralized healthcare. They
Right.
have,
Right. Yeah.
they probably have a better social safety net in Italy than the United States.
But
I
of
don't
course,
know.
the
I
Pope
don't know.
doesn't actually live in Italy,
No, he lives in a very,
the
it's
country of Vatican City.
yeah, autonomous city state, the Vatican City. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's Italy. It's
I know.
it's not even DC. You know what I mean? Like, it's in my opinion.
People don't fly to the Vatican to see the Pope; they fly to Rome.
Yeah, right.
But so yeah, but I would agree also that the church exists in places just like my United Methodist Church. We exist in areas that are very conservative and very liberal and everywhere in between. And we have doctrine that goes back, and we have our social principles that we're trying to understand how we be global. And I don't like the universal. Uh, that's not the word. International is the word I'm looking for, because in Africa, for instance, we have there are countries like Ghana that they mention that favor death to sexuals, and so if they went in as a pastor or a bishop and said we support LGBTQ equality, they could also be imprisoned for saying such things, and so they're under different standards of
Right.
living than we are. But yeah,
But
and
that's more complicated than just any religion in any area. I mean, there's a Christian church in Gaza, you know.
yeah, and Asteria is pointing out eastern part of Europe is Eastern or is Eastern Orthodox. Uh, the Western Catholic Church is the Roman Catholic Church, whereas the Orthodox churches are the ones that we talked about in that video that I shared you before we started this, about the young men were flocking to that church because of its hyper masculine view of
Sure, yeah.
how, yeah.
Which is so
But
odd to
yeah,
me.
so we the United Methodist Church had churches in Russia and also Ukraine and some other areas. Those have left the United Methodist Church on the issue of LGBTQ stuff. So, um, but
What do they call
so
themselves
my
now?
uh, I don't know if they joined the Global Methodist Church, which is the denomination that
The
started
Global
out of this.
Methodist.
That's what they came up with.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
the funny was that you'd hear the people say, "Are we going global or not?" Okay. Sometimes your choice of words makes all the difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I do want to say we were talking about this beforehand, and I want to say in the end that my views on this Pope. Again, I'm a United Methodist. I'm not a Catholic. I don't know things that all those Latin words that they would discuss there. I took Latin in high school. I guess I can't interpret everything. But I want to say that for me, this Pope was somebody that showed his humanity and understood humanity in people. He came across as non-judgmental. I loved it when he said, "Who to judge?" And I think that says to people, who am I to judge? And if the Pope is not able to judge in the Catholic hierarchy, where he is the one that makes all the rules, if the Pope says it's true, then if he says, "Who am I to judge?" Then for all those below, who are they to judge?
Right.
And
But they don't like that. They want to judge. They want to judge.
they want it. That's right. People want to judge, and so for me, he said a lot and did a lot of the right things in treating people on the LGBTQ spectrum, or people, his stances about abortion, his statements about abortion rights and women's rights, and a lot of those things that you and I would agree on as liberals. Um, he certainly changed the focus of the Roman Catholic Church away from, let's only talk about abortion, for instance. But he didn't really make any changes that there are not women priests all of a sudden.
Sure.
There's not a stance in the Catholic Church that defends abortion rights.
Attitudinally.
Right. Attitudinally. Yes. And
the Catholic Church made some changes. Right.
Yeah.
Which is good. I jive with that.
It's a step in the right direction.
At the same time, it's...
I have a friend who's a Catholic.
Just another religion to me.
Well, I have a friend who's a Catholic, and I know he's pretty right wing politically, not very religious, and he was married a few years ago. I did the wedding, and his new wife has a trans child, and adult trans child.
Okay.
And
18, 19, 20?
Probably early 20s at this point.
How long transitioned?
And so
do we have that information?
I do not think at that time, not just dress and demeanor and sure. Name and all of that. So the thing is that because now he knows somebody, and it impacts his wife's life and it impacts his life. When a lot of when the orange one was elected, I think even more so, thought about moving somewhere else that would be more accepting of her trans child.
Right.
And as before the election also. And I would never have imagined him saying that 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But drummers are weird. So.
Oh, this is a drummer. Okay.
He's a drummer. Yeah. Jazz drummer.
Less weird as a jazz drummer, I would say.
That's right.
But
yeah,
it's still a drummer.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
I know a jazzer that got a Grammy nomination. I know a bluegrass singer that got a Grammy nomination.
Man, you know more musician talent than me.
Yeah, that's what they like to think. So.
All right. Well, I think that's good enough for this week. I didn't expect a 13-minute video to go this far. Just introduce the ongoing question on free will, and you could probably send me down a rabbit hole for another 45 hours talking about this stuff. But
I think Dara ran off because she got tired of hearing all that.
I think she. Well, you never know. She got a kid, a husband, and who knows? Jessica only popped in a little bit. Carl only popped in a little bit, and then Ed
so
wanted
she has
to be
a
on.
life.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're not necessarily the best draw at all times, Billy.
What? Not really.
All right. Well, again, I think we're going to cut the stream off now, and I appreciate everybody who's still here that's chatted in, and We'll do it again next Tuesday. I'll try to put us back on the Christian nationalism. I really want to get to the third part of that lady's video just because it's modern and we talk about today's stuff. But I keep on having things that I want to talk about instead, like the Pope
By the
dying.
way, there's a clip out of the television, the show The Pit.
The
that
Pit. I've heard
addresses
about this.
Yeah, it's Noah White.
Yeah,
It's an ER and
he's back in
Pittsburgh.
the ER, huh?
Yeah, and it's in Pittsburgh, which is kind of
Isn't that
not
right?
one per accent yet.
Noah Wiley, he was
In ER, yes.
in ER, and now he's in the Pit, which is an ER. So yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying,
Anyway,
quote in the Pit.
There is a clip in there that talks about how men are being drawn away from rational thought. Some of the things talked about by the stuff they see online because they don't get it in the place. They don't get the truth and facts in school and in their homes.
We're trying to be here, Billy.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get a clip of that. I think you might find that line interesting.
Cool. Well, I thank you again, and again, thanks to everybody else, and we will holler at y'all next week. Be easy now.